What's going on, YouTube? This is BoxingWave. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Also, hit that bell notification button so you'll be alerted whenever I drop new content. Follow me on both Twitter and Instagram at BoxingWave10. All right, let's get into it, man. We got an undisputed fight this weekend coming up, and I will be covering the fight. I will be doing live commentary this Saturday for this entire card. It's going to be on Showtime, so make sure you tune in this Saturday, all right? We should have a good time. All right, very excited for this. I mean, this is an undisputed fight, a fighter that, I've always supported on this channel, Jermell Charlo, for a really, really, really long time here. One of my personal favorite fighters. And I'm really excited, man, because this is one of my favorite divisions. A lot of my favorite fighters are in this division here. Some moved up in weight over the years, but I still love the division because it's so very competitive. No one really truly dominates the division. Everyone is taking their losses at some point. So let's talk about it, man. First, I want to talk a little bit about Brian Castano. All right, he's undefeated, but a lot of people are not really aware of who he is. And I think a lot of people are underestimating him because they're just not aware. He's not a popular guy. And he wasn't around when a lot of these other PBC top fighters were fighting each other, okay, over the years. Like even back when Canelo was down there, Andrade, both Charlo twins, J-Rock, Trout, Lara. All of these guys were heard, All of these guys were fighting each other, and Castano's name was never really brought up. But I wouldn't want people to get confused and just not take him serious because of that. Because he's a very good decorated amateur. He beat guys like Errol Spence in the amateurs. He beat Sergey Deverenchenko in the amateurs, but not really an amateur type of fight. If you haven't seen that fight, definitely go check it out. But Castano is legit. All right, and he's not going to be a walk in the park. I think people think that because Charlo beat names like Erickson Lubin or Jason Rosario and some other fighters, I think they believe that this is just an easy win for him. All he has to do is but beat Castano and he'll be undisputed. He actually has to be at his best this Saturday night to beat this guy. This guy is very, very, very experienced, and he's undefeated. And as far as describing him and his style, I would call him like a technical pressure fighter. Okay, I brought up Deverenchenko. I would compare his style to Deverenchenko a bit, and we know that Deverenchenko has been one of the toughest fighters at 160 over the years. Yes, he lost to Jacobs, he lost to Triple G, he lost to Jermell, but he was a hard fight for all three. Some people believe that he beat Triple G and Daniel Jacobs. All right, took a lot of punishment in a Triple G fight though, and went on to fight Jermell Charlo, who beat him, but it was a very competitive fight as well. But I would compare, in preparation for this fight on Jermell's end, I would compare and want to spar a guy like a Deverenchenko to prepare for this fight. Maybe another name that I can compare Castano to around those divisions is Jack Colque. All right, guys that are not really tall in their division. They don't have the length and arm reach advantage or anything, but they are very athletic fighters that are light on their feet, that have very good, quick feet, and they're able to close the gap really, really fast and go to work, throw combinations, attack the body. And with Castano, these are the things that you have to worry about. He throws a lot of punches. He's at least giving you 50 punches around. Okay, he could, not consistently, depending on who he was facing. Obviously, when he fought Lara, he wasn't giving you those kind of numbers. But in other fights where he's applying pressure, like when he fought Patrick Teixeira in his last fight where he won the WBO title, in that fight he applied a lot of pressure and stayed on Patrick Teixeira and other fighters too. He put, even against a guy like Derevyanchenko who brought pressure too, and that's what made that fight a good fight, because these guys kind of fight the same way, you know, and they were going back and forth. They were really going at it, and a really, really debatable win for Castano. All right. Castano's always also been in there with Michel Sorrell, another good fighter at 154 over the years. Beat guys like Glenn Tapia back in the day. Another good fighter that I'm familiar with, and probably has the most similar, as far as styles and is concerned, to Jermell Charlo. Not quite as good and explosive as Jermell Charlo, but another really good fighter. All right. So Castano is legit, and I believe that he is better than a Jason Rosario. I think Jason is a pressure fighter as well, and he's a huge puncher, a much bigger puncher than Castano. All right, but I don't think he has the technique that Castano has. You know, with the probing and the feinting and you know, getting low, and the athleticism that he has, the hand speed that he has. I think outside of power, I think Castano has almost every other advantage over a Jason Rosario. All right, Jason was just a very dangerous puncher. You know, he's a heavy-handed fighter. You know, so I think that was the main danger there with Jermell Charlo, especially after knocking out J-Rock, who was coming off the win with Jarrett Hurd. So if you're not familiar with Castano, I'm just trying to give you some background on him, on his style. He's very, very good. All right. And as far as rounds are concerned, he might not have the power that Jermell does, but he's very, very capable of picking up points against a fighter like Jermell Charlo. All right. Comparison to Tony Harrison, there's not much of a comparison there to Tony. Tony is a very, very technical fighter, a defensive fighter, but Tony doesn't have the firepower as a Castano, and he probably doesn't have the durability as him, and the stamina, you know, and the endurance that a Castano has. Okay, and overall athleticism as well. Castano is very, very fast. Tony is just excellent with his timing, his jab, and just was able to counter Jermell and like keep him in a space where he wasn't able to be explosive. You know, we'll see if Castano is going to be able to do that, but Castano can fight going backwards. He can move very, very well. He doesn't always have to come forward. All right. There's fights where, like the Derevyanchenko fight, where he wasn't coming forward the entire time, where he was fighting on his back foot a lot in that fight, because Derevyanchenko is another fighter that fights the same way, and he was a bigger guy coming forward, and Castano was forced to fight going backwards, but catching, you know, Derevyanchenko coming in, and you know, he would step back real quick, pop, 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 and keep moving. So Castano could fight any kind of fight. So if he chooses to go, or if he's forced to go backwards against Jermell Charlo, he can fight on his back foot. He can pretty much do it all. He doesn't have the greatest defense, but it's not bad neither. And he doesn't have the biggest punching power. All right, he's not known for his knockout power against the better fighters that he faced. Whereas Jermell, pretty much everybody he's faced at this point since he transitioned over to Derek James over from Ronnie Shields, he changed his style totally, you know. And let's talk about Jermell. Jermell is, you know, he has this one loss against Tony Harrison, which he avenged in the rematch. But outside of that, you know, he's fought some good fighters over his career, you know, at 154. Before, when he was with Ronnie Shields, he, you know, he fought guys like Gabe Rosado and beat him. He fought a really, really tough fight against Vanes Monterosian. And with after the transition, he fought guys like John Jackson who box well. I think that was one of his first earlier fights when he switched over to Derrick James. So he was still trying to get into the new style, and he was losing a lot of rounds early because he was getting outboxed. He was walking into shots. John Jackson was doing a lot of things that Tony Harrison was doing against Charlo in his win against Charlo. And even if you go back, you look at like guys like Demetrius Hopkins that Jermell Charlo had struggled with years ago. Those are guys that actually were outboxing him for some point. But John Jackson, Tony Harrison, just couldn't keep it going. And Jermell finally got to them and was able to knock both of those guys out, in a Harrison rematch and everything. But yeah, Jermell has been Jermell, in my opinion, at this point, has proven that pound for pound, he is one of the most dangerous punchers in the sport. Okay, he is a guy that can take you out with one punch. We saw what happened in a Lubin fight, in a fight that Lubin was the favorite in. A lot of people believed, even though Lubin wasn't nearly as proven, that Lubin was, though, they expected Lubin to win that fight. Leading up to that fight, Lubin was stopping a lot of guys, and he looked very strong and powerful. He was good. His highlights was good. He was one of the top prospects in the sport. And Jermell was able to get him out of there in one round and one of the knockout of the year type of knockouts. One punch, put him away, had him stiff on the ground. And he beat guys like Charles Hatley, and recently beat Jason Rosario. So yeah, Charlo and his style, very athletic, is another guy that has good speed, moves extremely well. Okay, he was a mover, a big time mover, boxer, earlier in his career with Ronnie Shields, but now, yes, he's an explosive power puncher. He does have a good jab still. Him and his brother always had a good jab. They are good with mixing the punches up, going to the body, shifting their body left to right pretty well, keeping that guard tight, and good, pretty solid counter punching and timing. He likes to put the power down with most of his shots. He likes to lead with his power shots as well. So Jermell Charlo is all about the power. Sometimes we can criticize him, like in Harrison fights, that he wasn't really setting up the power shots too well. I think he gets a little bit too eager in his power, and falls in love with it a little too much. But I think with those fights too, I think mentally Tony definitely got into him because of those legendary press conferences that we had. They were hilarious in both fights. And I think Tony really got to him. So I think Jermell was just so eager to get the knockout so quickly, just like the Hatley situation, Here, there's no real bad blood here, It's just a fight, and it's a very important fight, and it's a big fight, and it's a tough fight against a guy I've never seen lose before. And I never seen Castano looked so vulnerable before. Even in a Lara fight, which was a draw, he had a lot of success at some point in that fight. I don't remember it too well. I did watch a little bit of it in the highlights, but Lara's an interesting fighter. He's kind of the type that might not dominate his opponents, but he always finds a way to make them look bad because he knows how to slow down the pace. All right, here, Jermell Charlo. Jermell would really have to worry about, and well, let me say this. I think Jermell's biggest strengths is, even though he packs a lot of power, he definitely knows how to use it in situations where you don't really think he can use it, like especially moving backwards. Jermell is very quick at stepping in and out and using that power. So even if you smother him a little bit, like I expect Castano to do in some points, Jermell is really, really good at creating space by using his legs and stepping out and throwing power shots, whether it's a left hook or an overhand right or an uppercut on the inside or a shot to a body. Jermell is really, really good at creating space quickly, very swiftly, you know? And I think Castano has to be aware of that. And he has to be aware of those short shots by Jermell, all right? When he is, if he is the plan to smother him and stay on top of him, you know? If he's going to take that route. I don't know what route he's planning to take. I think he's going to make adjustments in the middle of the fight. So he has to be aware that even if you're closing in on Jermell, Jermell can step out, create some space, and throw something hard and heavy, all right, and hurt Castano if he's not careful. He has to be careful of coming in. Yes, he's shorter. I don't believe he has the reach that Jermell has. So he's used to fighting guys that's taller than him, longer than him. And he's used to having to close the gap. He has to be very, very careful of stepping in because Jermell has a lot of power. So what Castano needs to do is he needs to apply, you know, smart pressure, right? I don't think he could be as aggressive as he was against Patrick in his last fight. But I think he needs to be more aggressive than he was against Lara. Lara just... part of the reason, whether you think Lara lost that fight or not, I think Lara picked up a lot of rounds because he slowed the pace down. All right, too much for Brian Castano, and Castano gave Lara too many rounds. Even though Lara wasn't landing much that was very clean, he knew how to create the space and keep Castano outside of danger, you know. And every time Castano would step in, Lara would just grab him and hold him. All right, and keep him on the end of his jab and end of that straight left hand he has. Castano has to be more aggressive than he was in that fight, but he can't be as aggressive in the Patrick fight because in the Patrick Teixeira fight, Castano just didn't respect Patrick Teixeira's power enough. All right, and Patrick, even though he was boxing well, was landing shots, he was moving well. I don't think Brian respected his power. You know, I don't think Teixeira was really hurting him, no matter what he did. You know, whereas Jermell is a guy that you have to worry about his power. You know, he hits hard. He's proven that he's a big monster puncher at this point. So the way I see this fight going, I could see Castano winning rounds because of activity. You know, he's going to be constantly jabbing. I think there's going to be doing some things that can throw Jermell off a little bit with his feints, especially coming in and getting low and closing the gap really quickly. I mean, even though Jermell has very quick feet, Castano has a lot of very quick feet as well. So I think he'll be able to, at times, to surprise Jermell and close the gap. So Castano definitely needs to keep the volume up, all right? He needs to be careful. We got to watch out for the counters and overhand rights and those left hooks as he steps in. He definitely has to be careful with that. But he has to apply the pressure. He has to keep the pressure going. You know, Jermell is a guy with the 3 titles. He has the more experience as a pro, bigger names, better names on his resume as a pro. So he definitely needs to apply that pressure and pick up those rounds with Jermell, who doesn't always throw a lot of punches, but he tries to make every punch count. Whereas Jermell, being that he moves extremely well, he can't sit in a pocket long with Brian. I think he needs to find spots where he could exchange with Brian because he could actually hurt Brian in those exchanges, right? But he can't stay in these situations because Brian is a guy that is used to wanting to get in a pocket with guys and trade. So, because his combinations and his hand speed is really good on the inside and close range. So Jermell needs to pick his spots and keep it moving, but throws things out there that's going to make Brian aware, like, yo, respect me, don't stay in here, you could get hurt here. And I think that's what Jermell needs to do. Use that jab to the body constantly, throw those right hands to the body, attack Brian's body. You want to slow the guy down because he has great conditioning. So you want to slow him down for the later rounds. And luckily, hopefully later on, like against Tony Harrison, you're able to clip him and hurt him later on in the fight. Whether you're down on points or up on points, whatever the way it goes, that's what Jermell needs to do. He needs to just keep boxing and keep moving. All right. And sit down on that power, but maybe not be too wide with it. He could throw wide shots sometimes. Maybe we should do a little bit more with those straight shots, punch through Castano's high guard, and keep it moving. All right. What I think is going to happen here, and this is my prediction for the fight. I think Jermell Charlo is going to pull off the win here because this ambulance just wants to drive extremely slow with the sirens on right now, and it's extremely annoying. It's nothing I can do it. He's going like 2 miles per hour. You got to love New York City. I think Jermell Charlo is going to win. I'm not sure if he can knock out Castano. I think he's capable of it, but I'm not sure because Castano seems to be a pretty durable fighter, especially with the style that he has. He has to be durable in order to apply that much pressure. He does normally take a lot of hits, but he's never fought a puncher like Jermell Charlo. All right, but I think even if it does go the distance, which I'm kind of expecting, I am expecting Jermell to at least rock or hurt Castano a couple of times in this fight. I think Castano is going to win a lot of rounds just being based on activity, going to Charlo's body and outworking him and smothering him at points. But Jermell has to keep in mind that, I think not keep in mind, but I think they're aware of this. And I think Jermell is going to keep moving. He's not going to be sitting and trying to trade like Chisera was doing with Castano. I think he's going to constantly move and put him back in a position where, he could be on the attack or there'll be some space so he can get off. And I think at points in this fight, he's going to hurt Castano. Maybe drop him, at least rock him a little bit, where he's going to win rounds, even if he's down in a round. But overall, I think Jermell is just too experienced at this point. I think if Castano fought Jermell maybe a few years back, in the earlier Derrick James years, I think he could have definitely pulled off this win. But I think Jermell fighting all of these fighters at this point, he's just so experienced, and Castano is too. He's very experienced, and he does have good wins, especially as an amateur. But overall, as a pro, fighting guys like Rosario, who smothered him, hurt him, not hurt him bad, but rocked him with a couple big shots in that fight, applied a lot of pressure. A guy that like Tony Harrison, that was highly technical, that was outboxing, outthinking Charlo in those fights. I think with going back to fighting guys like Manas Monterosian, who was still in his prime at that time, Gabe Rosado and John Jackson and all of these fighters, Erickson Lubin, all of these guys that he's fought and knocked most of them out. I think that this makes him the safer pick for me, Is it 50-50 fight? I think it's pretty damn close to being a 50-50. I'm thinking more like 55-45 for Jermell Charlo. I think he definitely has the advantage, but it wouldn't really be that much of an upset if Castano were to win this fight, because I know what he brings, and I know when it comes to scoring rounds, because of his activity, it'll be very easy to give rounds to him because of his activity. All right, and because of his accuracy too, got a very good punch selection, good hand speed, and just him being active. I think he has a chance of beating Jermell, but I'm going with Jermell. And I'm going with Jermell by decision, Obviously, we could get a knockout in there, but I'm expecting, I think Castano is a tougher guy than Rosario and Harrison. And I think he and Hatley and John Jackson and all of these other guys, I think Castano's tougher. And I think he's going to go the distance with Jermell. And Jermell's going to win. And we'll have an undisputed champion, all right? So listen, that's my breakdown. Smash that like button. Subscribe to the channel. And I'll see you Saturday. I'll see you guys Saturday. I will be here covering the fight. All right? Peace.